What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, and today, joined by a good friend, Daniel Ajibike. I know you guys are wondering where Alex is. He'll be back on the channel tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and get that out of the way. This is by no means replacing Alex, but just joining or being joined today by Daniel to talk some Giants. Good friend and follower of the channel, and somebody who I think has some really good Giants insight to bring onto the channel. So we're going to go ahead and get a different voice on here because I'm sure that you guys are sick and tired of only hearing from me every single day for the last several weeks. So Daniel today, Alex tomorrow, and more variety on the way. But today we are going to be taking a look at training camp. It kicks off on Wednesday. I will be there next Thursday and Friday with Alex. So if you want to come say what's up to us, let us know, shoot us some DMs, or just be on the lookout for us at those two practices next week. But training camp's finally here. There's a lot to talk about and a lot to preview, and I'm really excited for the Giants to finally take the practice field once again. Daniel, how are you doing today, my friend? Welcome to the channel, and what are your thoughts as the Giants get ready for training camp?
Thank you. Thank you. Excited to be here. What's up, Fireside family? Um, Thoughts? I'm excited to see these position battles. I want to know who's starting. I want to see who's getting first team reps, second team reps, third team reps. Uh, I'm excited to see Malik Neighbors go one on one with these new guys, especially Paulson Adebo, our new starting corner. So I'm excited. I want to see a lot of splash plays. I want to see a lot of fun, media driven training camp.
For sure. And one thing that I'm excited about this year, we don't have to worry about Daniel Jones's facial hair for 3 weeks and make random news and content about that. No more. Now we actually have some legitimate quarterback talent like Russell Wilson and some leaders like Russ and Jameis, and just a more optimistic outlook going into the season. But that's right. I want to talk about some of these position battles, as you mentioned, because there are a few. For the most part, this lineup does seem like it's pretty much locked in early. I don't think there's a ton of moving parts like there have been in recent years. There's definitely not much of a quarterback position battle. The Giants have been pretty clear that Russell Wilson is going to be the starter. But when you flip over to the defensive side of the ball and then you look at some more niche positions along each sides of the ball, there are definitely some position battles to watch out for. One of them being cornerback. So we've discussed this a little bit on the channel here or there, but I'm excited to kind of rattle this off with you as well. And I know you've got the inside track here into some of the Giants cornerbacks, so definitely want to hear your info there. But Cordell Flott versus Deonte Banks seems like it's going to be a battle. Banks obviously was expected to become the CB2 after the signing of Paulson and Debo, but during the spring, we heard a lot about how Cordell Flott was standing out. John Schmelk of Giants.com said he made more plays on the ball than any cornerback that the Giants had during the spring, and he was rotating in, taking first-team reps alongside Deonte Banks. So seems like there could be a position battle opening up there this training camp at CB2. I'm excited to see how that goes. Obviously, everybody who's been viewing the channel for a while knows I'm probably Deonte Banks' biggest fan, but I am totally open to making this a battle between him and Flott because, let's face it, Banks has not performed at a level where he is irreplaceable by any means. So, Daniel, how are you feeling about that CB2 battle, and what's your kind of outlook there between Flott and Deonte Banks?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to fight on that Deonte Banks biggest fan. I'm a pretty big Deonte Banks guy myself, but I do remember, I'm fortunate enough to remember a time watching Cordell Flott guard Jamar Chase, guard Justin Jefferson, and do fairly well, especially in the playoff game, Justin Jefferson versus Cordell Flott. It was actually a battle. He held his own, and it was very respectable. That being said, I think Cordell Flott I think his ceiling is a good CB2, which is what we need. That being said, I do feel like Deonte Banks' ceiling is CB1 material. He has all the physical attributes. I know we always talk about that relative athletic score. Fast, big, strong, aggressive, physical corner, especially with this new D-line we have, this seemingly new defense. I'm expecting it to be top two. I know that's kind of bold to say, but I'm expecting it to be top two. So with our new D-line and him being a physical man press corner, I expect this to be a year for a Deonte Banks bounce back.
I'm hoping that it is, man. Like, seriously, because when Deonte Banks was drafted by the Giants, you mentioned that relative athletic score. I think he had a perfect 10.0 or a 9.99 or whatever.
Close to
I
it.
mean, Yeah, he's built to play cornerback. He's built to be a CB1, like you said, and the potential is definitely there. But the questions aren't necessarily about his physical acumen and that kind of talent. It's more about the focus and the concentration and the effort and the confidence. Those are the things that really make a cornerback special, and those were the things that came into question last season. But they've never come into question for Cordell Flott. And one of the things that I'll also mention about Cordell Flott, he hasn't always played the best football, and the Giants have somewhat struggled to keep him on the field because he has been inconsistent. But I always felt like that was a fault of the Giants' own making. And the reason I say that is because coming out of LSU, he was an outside cornerback. The Giants immediately inserted him into the slot. He had to learn a new position. He didn't like playing that new position. I spoke with Brian Walker, the defensive backs trainer, who's a friend of the channel, who obviously has trained guys like Darnay Holmes and Xavier McKinney in the past, and he said that that was a terrible decision for the Giants, and I agreed with him, to move Cordell Flott from the outside to the slot where he had no experience. Last year, he played his best ball. Where did he play it? On the outside. The Giants finally realized working him in at the nickel cornerback spot wasn't going to work. So they moved him outside, and he played the best football of his career so far, and honestly seemed to be getting better week in and week out throughout the final stretch. And now entering year 4 of his career with all this experience and adversity under his belt, I think that he's on an upward rise. It's a contract year for him. He has a lot to prove, and if he plays well, he certainly could earn a payday. So I think there are plenty of reasons to believe that Flott's got his confidence back. He's made progress, and he really could push for that CB2 job. But then there's also Banks, maybe a little bit of a fire underneath him coming off of a year where he received a lot of criticism. And I'm hopeful that he can turn that criticism into motivation and come back with a newfound confidence this season. So I really think the stage is set for a very interesting battle here. But I'm definitely curious to hear your thoughts, with Cordell Flott. You mentioned that game that he had against Justin Jefferson in the 2022 wild card. That was a great performance. He made some really crucial plays in that one. And then last year, like I said, definitely some good moments down the stretch. But Deonte Banks, have we seen enough from him? Enough flash plays? I don't know. So I don't know. What's kind of your take here as the stage is set, like I said, with Flott kind of on this upward rise, but meanwhile, Deonte Banks kind of being on some shaky ground.
Right. Just to piggyback off what you said, Cordell Flott being an outside corner is where he's always should have played. He never should have been in the slot. And when he got moved to the outside, you saw that consistent increase in his play. I personally feel Banks is, like we were talking about his athletic score, he's very athletic, and it's a very fluid athletic. He's not just big and fast. He is built to play corner. He is fluid like a corner. He's always in the right position. I know a lot of people give him a lot of slack for his playing the ball ability. I feel in this next year, him being in the right place, he'll be much better this time. Balls won't be as caught. Balls will be more broken. Passes will be broken up, and we'll be able to make plays on these pass attempts. I think the lack of effort I think that was just how the season was going. Maybe it wasn't going well. That's not an excuse. I'm not excusing it. There's no reason to not be showing effort, to having a lack of effort. But I feel all the critiques and criticism will definitely light a fire on him. He hears us saying there's a CB2 battle. He hears us saying that he might not play. He might be benched. He might do this. I don't know if you guys have kept up with his Instagram posts, but he's working daily. He's working every day. He's always posting about it. So I think we're in a very good spot. I think this battle will not only be good for us as a team, but I think it's a healthy battle. I think it'll light a fire under both of them, and iron sharpens iron.
I agree with that. And I think that's a really good way to describe it. The competition, I think, is important, especially during training camp. You want players to be pushed. You want them to feel like their jobs are on the line because it should hopefully push them to play harder and play better. And I'll say this for Deonte Banks and his effort problems. I think there were effort problems all over the place last season. For some reason, Banks was the one who got singled out because I think that his moments came at a time where the camera was just so clearly on him. But there were effort problems from other guys as well. And it really was a result, like you said, of the season not going the way that anyone planned for it to. And I think a lot of it truly for the defensive side of the ball had a lot to do with how bad the offense was. Bad offense is going to wear down on a defense no matter how much talent is on that side of the ball, just because think about the moments where maybe the defense real long drive, gets a stop right outside the red zone, forces 3 points, and then the offense goes out there 3 and out, and boom, now they're on the field for another long drive. You're bound to get frustrated, you're bound to get worn down, and you're bound to have your effort ultimately called into question out of frustration. So I do think that it's, we could cut him a little bit of slack, but you also did mention the ball skills. That's the buzzword that I like to use. And my girlfriend always laughs at me because she listens to the show and she finds it hilarious when I use that term. But Deonte Banks needs to improve the ball skills. He'll be there in coverage. Coverage is tight. I always think about that play against Amari Cooper where I thought that he had perfect stride for stride coverage. And then all of a sudden, Amari Cooper just rising up above him and making the catch on the sideline because he didn't get his head turned around. That's the number one thing. If he can show during training camp that he's got that skill fixed over Cordell Flott, I think that will be his way to win that CB2 job.
Yeah. I think another point to add there is how good Paulson Adebo's ball skills are. Even since his rookie year, one-handed picks, like he has a receiver background. The ball skills are definitely there. So him going against Paulson Adebo, working on those type things, him going against Malik Neighbors, these receivers, I think we're bound to see that improve.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, bringing up Paulson Adebo and his experience, having the ball skills and everything, because really what I thought was missing from that secondary last year, and I said this very early in last offseason, the Giants didn't have enough experience in that secondary. They didn't have a CB1, and they didn't do anything to patch that up. They just relied on Banks to take that next step. But now they've got some experience. They've got Paulson Adebo. He has great ball skills, and he has a lot of knowledge to share with the rest of these young cornerbacks, Deonte Banks included. So hopefully he can show him the ropes and get Banks to be a better player himself. So I think that addition of Adebo, as you mentioned, is definitely going to be an important one for the Giants. But let's flip over to the offensive side of the ball and take a look at this offensive line over on the interior. One of the surprising decisions that I think the Giants made this offseason, and I don't know if they necessarily made it or if they were kind of forced into making it, they didn't upgrade at right guard. They had Greg Van Roten last season. They're rolling with Greg Van Roten again this season. I know there were some rumors that they were in a bidding war for Will Fries in free agency. The price tag got too high. They ultimately didn't sign him. They pivoted and signed Javon Holland instead, another player who should probably help Deonte Banks this season with his experience. But right guard essentially goes untouched. They don't add any competition legitimately for Greg Van Roten unless you look at Marcus Bowe in the 5th round as a potential competition, or if you're even looking at Evan Neal there. So before we talk about the other guys competing for this job, I'll just ask you, Daniel, are you comfortable with Greg Van Roten as the projected starting right guard, or do you think that might have been an oversight from the Giants throughout this offseason?
I, Anthony, my friend, am comfortable with one offensive lineman, and his name is Andrew Thomas. But outside of that, and honestly, even Andrew Thomas has his health issues. So that being said, John Michael Schmitz hasn't really turned out as well as we would hope. I feel across the whole O-line, there was room for improvement, but it's not the worst O-line we've had, so I'm not completely out on it. Our right tackle, Jermaine Illuminor, he's looked great. He's looked well. He's fit in well. So I'm not too pressed about the O-line as I have been in past years. I'm hoping Evan Neal can turn out great and be a good guard. He's always been a great run blocker. I felt like he should have been moved inside 2 years ago. It just feels like Eric Flowers all over again. And I remember hating Eric Flowers so much. And then he went to the Redskins at the time and turned out to be a pretty decent guard. So I think it's something we should have done. And I believe that Evan Neal does have a lane to it just because Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are on the hot seat, quote unquote. So I feel like them having their draft pick actually turn out well might help just a little bit.
I do agree with that. I think getting those guys to develop and show some progress, whether you're talking Evan Neal, even guys like Dane Belton from that 2022 class and Cordell Flott as well, any of those guys from that 2022 class that has been so underwhelming so far, getting those guys to show some progress could demonstrate to ownership like, hey, we've got the right pieces in place. We just need time to continue developing them. Although going into another year of waiting, I don't know if John Mara is really going to buy into that. But I do think that's a good point. And then, with Greg Van Roten, part of me is like, okay, at least he's good enough. He's an adequate starter, and I feel comfortable with him sort of as a starter, but I wish that there was more insurance because he is 35 years old. You have to expect a player of that age to regress at some point. And I don't know how significant the regression would be, but I just wish the Giants had more of a clear-cut backup guard. Instead, what it seems like the backup plan would be is if Greg Van Roten needs to leave the lineup, it would be John Runyon moving to right guard and Evan Neal moving into the starting lineup at left guard. And while I agree with you, Neal making the switch to guard was the right play. And I'm happy that they did it on the left side where he seems to be more comfortable historically from his time in college. Again, kind of like with Cordell Flott, they flipped him to a new position and he didn't grasp it. I'm happy with that, but I'm worried that with Neal, since this transition to guard is only happening now, it didn't start last year, they just got the ball rolling. If he gets into the lineup too soon, it might be detrimental to his growth and progress at that position. So I'm very curious to see how this shapes out during training camp, see how Greg Van Roten performs, see how Evan Neal performs. I mean, he is honestly one of the players that I'm keeping a closest eye on during training camp. I can't wait for the pads to come on and to see how Evan Neal performs at guard when he's got Dexter Lawrence lined up right in front of him, right? So that's going to be fun, or just terrifying to watch. We'll see, but exciting on the side of Dexter Lawrence, I'm sure. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on Marcus Bowe, the 5th-round rookie? Giants drafted him to be a tackle. He said that he's willing to play any of the 5 positions on the offensive line. He'll play center. He'll play either guard spot, either tackle spot. But do you think that he could be the Giants' backup plan there at right guard in case Greg Van Roten has to leave the lineup?
Honestly, I don't. He is the textbook definition of swing tackle. I believe his game is very finesse, very, very technical. I don't think he does as well with power. And I think for what we want to do, we need real maulers at guard and on the inside, especially in the division we're in.
I do agree with that. I think that with Bowe being a bit undersized, I think that his finesse would work better at tackle. I think you're right about that. The power, I don't know if is necessarily there as a rookie to take over at guard, but then it also makes me wonder, with him being the size that he is, he's about 6'3" to 6'4", somewhere around there. Could he end up ultimately making that move all the way into the center position? I wonder, and being a backup plan for John Michael Schmitz, who you mentioned hasn't necessarily wowed us for the first few seasons of his career.
That actually sounds like a great plan. I would love to see what that looks like, actually. And when the pads come on, we will learn a lot about the New York Giants.
We will, especially on the offensive line. And, that's why I think it's an interesting question to pose. Is Marcus Bowe this backup plan at guard, or is that going to be too much to ask for him to be the second string guard as early as his rookie season? Because I think this is a player who, I think the Giants got a steal in the 5th round. He realistically was a 3rd-round talent. But even still, he is a 5th-round pick, and I don't want to rush a 5th-round pick onto the field just because I don't like who the Giants have in the starting lineup. This kid needs time to develop for sure, and he needs to figure out which position he fits best in, and that's going to take time, and it's going to take all of this training camp and probably even then some more time on top of that. So Marcus Bowe, very curious about him, and definitely curious to see Evan Neal. It's going to be really fun or really sad to watch this offensive line when the pads come on during training camp. We'll see. But let's go to our 3rd position battle that we want to discuss. Still in the trenches, still on the interior, but now talking about the defensive line. You've got Rakeem Nunez-Roche's returning. He's probably in line to be a starter once again, but the Giants added a couple of veterans with Roy Robertson-Harris and Jeremiah Ledbetter. Ledbetter is a guy who I think is pretty underrated. He had a good stat line last year, but then you've also got DJ Davidson returning. You've got Elijah Chapman from last year, and then the Giants, of course, added Darius Alexander in the 3rd round. So they have a bunch of names there, but nobody has a clear-cut starter next to Dexter Lawrence. Curious to hear your thoughts on that group, who you like out of it, and who you think ultimately could win one of those two, or even both of those two starting jobs next to Dexter Lawrence on the interior.
Honestly, I don't like our depth at DT. Darius Alexander, I would love to see him start. That would be very exciting. I think the most exciting second option we have is Elijah Chapman, actually. I love the way he plays. I love his heart. I love his effort. Undersized DT, but we've seen those work in the past. So I feel like there is room for him. I think our best bet would be Jordan Riley panning out. I watched the episode not too long ago where the coach was speaking about Jordan Riley and having him come to workouts with him and Dexter Lawrence. So working with Dexter Lawrence, I'm hoping with his big frame, his big body, if we can get those two paired on the same field at the same time, maybe on first downs, second downs, I think that could work out great.
Me too. I'm really curious about Jordan Riley because the way that Mark Hall described him was that he was just making this tremendous progress. And so that's one of those players. We are talking about training camp, we're talking about practice and having the pads come on, all that. I can't wait to see some of those interior defenders like Jordan Riley and like Darius Alexander, knowing that they've been training all off season with Dexter Lawrence and Mark Hall, a renowned defensive line trainer. How do they look when they show up from where they were during the spring, when they show up in the summer and those pads come on, how did they look then? I'm very curious. This is actually one of the position groups that I'm most excited to watch during training camp because I think there is so much room for growth here because there's so many young players. Yes, they've got Nunez Roches, they've got Ledbetter, they've got Roy Robertson Harris. Those are some veterans in the mix. We kind of know who those guys are. But then you've got those two young guys in Alexander and Riley who are actively training with the best defensive tackle in the game, Dexter Lawrence, and one of the best defensive line coaches outside of the NFL in Mark Hall. So there's just so much potential on this defensive line group, and I'm really curious to see how that all shakes out. So very excited for that position battle. And honestly, I'm hoping that Darius Alexander is able to win one of those starting jobs. Third round pick. Sometimes those guys come in and they can make an impact pretty quickly, and I think it's wide open for him. I'd love to see the Toledo product end up with one of those 3 starting interior defender jobs straight out of camp.
Yeah, the Toledo Rocket. I'm hoping. I'm banking on him or Jordan Riley. Those are my 2 best bets. I think Elijah Chapman is the most exciting and most curious. Has to go to Jordan Riley. I would love to see him pan out.
Yeah, it's funny too because I know Riley has had some moments in the league that are really impressive. He hasn't had consistency, but he's had a couple flash moments. And I think for a 7th round pick, it's one thing when we're talking about a former first round quarterback having 3 flash moments in a full season and everybody going crazy about that. That's not consistent enough. When you're talking about a former 7th round pick who's barely on the field having 3 or 4 flash moments in a season, okay, that's kind of exciting and intriguing. Could we get him some more playing time and develop him? That's always been my thought process with Riley. So I definitely want to see how he performs in training camp and really just all those guys because I think that's just wide open. It's Dexter Lawrence in the middle and then those 2 defensive ends on the interior. Who's it going to be? Obviously, one of those spots is going to be rotated with Abdul Carter, though, and I think we're all really excited to see that.
Yeah. I don't want to forget about Nacho. He is the vet on the team, so I think he could probably make some great plays there and still have some decent reps, but it's just he's not very exciting. He doesn't jump off the screen. It's just not reliable Nacho. And there's nothing wrong with being reliable, but I would love to see one of these young guys usurp him.
Yeah, me too. He is reliable, but when we're looking at those young guys, potential. It always catches our eyes as fans, right? We're like, what could they be rather than what they are? So that's that's what we're trying to see during training camp. But before we wrap this up, some of these other kind of honorable mentions for the top 3 position battles. I'm curious about this running back group because Tyrone Tracy Jr. is the projected starter, but you do have a capable veteran who honestly played great through the first 5 weeks of the season in Devin Singletary. And then you got Cam Scatterbo, who Giants fans are obviously thrilled about, bringing the power to the backfield. Very curious to see how that shapes out. Definitely keep an eye on those guys during camp. Do you have any thoughts on that running back group? And I know that group even goes further with Dante Turbo Miller, Eric Gray. Those guys are fighting for roster spots as well. How are you feeling about this crowded running back room that the Giants have put together?
It is very crowded. And I know there's a select group of people out there that thinks Cam Scatterbo will be the starter, actually. I'm sorry to tell you guys that is not happening. Tyrone Tracy will be the starter, as he should be. It's deservingly so. And I feel like a lot of people are forgetting about Motor. He was reliable when healthy. He was solid running back. He does everything, does the dirty work. So I think those 2 might be the duo, not Tracy and Scatterbo.
I think that with Scatterbo, it's going to be a little bit of a rotation for him early on. He's a very good receiver out of the backfield, and he does have a lot of power in those short yardage situations. But I've always mentioned, even in the pre-draft process when we were looking at running back prospects, he doesn't have a ton of speed to his game. And so I think it's going to be tough to get him on the field between the 20s. When you're in the red zone, I think that's going to work. He's going to have that power and he's going to have that ability to make some option routes out of the backfield and all of that stuff. He's really good at. But in those long yardage situations, I don't know. It remains to be seen. So I think he's going to be that rotational guy. I agree with you. I think Tracy has proven as a rookie last year that he can be a lead workhorse back. And so I think he's going to be the primary workload running back this season. And I think people are sleeping on Devin Singletary. I think it's kind of similar to what we were just saying there with Nacho and those veterans. We already know what they are, so we don't talk about them as much as those guys where we don't know who they are. We kind of speculate what Cam Scatterboo can be. But knowing what Singletary is, he's a pretty good running back. I think everybody forgets how good he played in week 2 last year versus the Commanders and broke like 20 tackles in that game, something ridiculous, had a touchdown. I mean, he's a pretty good player, and I don't think enough Giants fans appreciate him and what he brings to the table.
I do want to say for Scatterboo, I feel like his route onto the field, it will be blocking. He seems like a reliable pass blocker, or not so much reliable, but more willing. A willing blocker, reliable pass catcher, and like you said, very powerful runner. So I think that will be how he can inch his way onto the field and kind of do some of that dirty work.
Yeah, he's definitely not afraid of contact. That much is for sure. And I do think it's going to be fun when we get some of those big truck stick moments from him this year because they're bound to happen. And then let's talk about the wide receiver spot as well before we wrap up. Just some of those guys in this group. There's the 3 undrafted rookies that I talked about in yesterday's episode. I'm curious to see if any of them carve out a role through probably, that'll be through special teams. But then you've got Jalen Hyatt and some of those other backups. Do you think Hyatt, is there a world where he can perform strongly enough throughout training camp to sneak into probably a rotation? I don't think he'll take the starting job from Slayton, but do you think that he could earn at least a larger role than what he got last season, hopefully?
That's the hope, because the year before last season was pitiful. This past season is another pitiful. He's just not being utilized. But with all this muscle he's put on and he's added weight and he's been grinding, I'm hoping we can see a lot more of him. I don't think he'll take the starting position. It's about time we put some real respect on Darius Slayton. I know he never has the 1,000-yard seasons that everyone wants to see, but we have to take into aspect everything. Daniel Jones, different quarterbacks, different coordinators. It's been so much with Darius Slayton. And he is a bona fide receiver in the NFL. He is a good starting receiver in the NFL, and it's about time we stop trying to push him to the side or push him down the board. But I'm hoping Jalen Hyatt can get in there and do something. I know he got hurt during these OTAs, and Bo Collins came and made some plays for us, and he's a bigger receiver. I've always thought that the Giants are missing big body receivers. The last big body receivers might have been Allen Robinson, Kenny Galladay, like those, we haven't really had a big bona fide receiver. And Bo Collins is giving me David Sills vibes. So I'm maybe we can get that train rolling with him.
The Sills Army will be happy to get a shout out for the first time in a long time on this channel for sure. I haven't heard David Sills in a minute. The number 13 post OBJ, which is hilarious. No, I think it's good to mention the size that Jalen Hyatt added. That's another player who my frustration has been apparent for a while. Why did they move him from being a slot receiver in college to forcing him to play on the outside over the last 2 years? It's never made sense to me. But hey, now that he's added the 25 pounds, let's see if he can compete on the outside. I think that was very clear and obvious that he needed to add that weight, and hopefully that does translate to some improvement this season. But I really love what you said about Darius Slayton. I don't think there's much of a position battle here because we talk so much about how Russell Wilson's deep ball ability is going to help Jalen Hyatt. But hey, what is Darius Slayton's biggest strength? Going deep. We saw it when Tyrod Taylor was on the field. So I really think that if you're going to pick one of these receivers for breakout, my hot take is that it's going to be Malik Neighbors. His stat line last season was ridiculous. I think it's going to be better with legitimate quarterback play. Because I mean, think about that. He put up, 109 receptions, 1,200 yards, and 7 touchdowns with Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, Tim Boyle, and Drew Lock as his quarterbacks. I think he could push
two games
around this year. Yeah, and missed 2 games. So he really should have had like 1,400 yards. So that's the real breakout, I think. But outside of the obvious bona fide superstar, Slayton, I think, could go for 1,000 yards this year potentially with Russell Wilson as his quarterback. I truly do believe that.
I think so as well. I'm right there with you.
Well, all right. I think that wraps this one up. We've got training camp in only a couple more days. It's going to be a lot of fun previewing this throughout the week and discussing. Daniel, appreciate you joining me. I had a good time talking some Giants with you and hope to have you back on soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Giants.
Where can the people find you?
It's GB Lotto on Twitter, GB Lotto, King Lotto on Instagram, and you'll see me on Twitch every now and then as well.
Sounds good. All right. We'll see you back on the channel soon. For everybody, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, catch you on the next one. Have a good one. And let's go Giants.